So there I was, sitting in the Academy's rec hall with my fellow cadets, watching what would later become the most viral combat footage in galactic history. And by viral, I mean it spread faster than a Rigelian plague through a space station's air recycling system. Which, trust me, is not a pleasant comparison to make when you're trying to enjoy reconstituted protein paste that already tastes like it came from said recycling system. The holographic display flickered to life above our table, casting that familiar blue glow that meant someone had intercepted another piece of classified military footage. You know how it is. Nothing stays secret in the age of quantum communication networks and bored communications officers with too much time and too little supervision. "Check this out," whispered Cadet Briggs, his eyes already glued to the projection. "Battle footage from the Kepler Station incident. Word is, some lone human held off an entire Vorthak war party for 3 hours. I nearly choked on my protein paste. Not because it was particularly shocking news. Humans had been pulling off impossible military stunts since we'd stumbled onto the galactic stage like a drunk tourist at a diplomatic reception. No, I choked because I knew exactly which lone human they were talking about. See, here's the thing about being that guy. Nobody expects the scrawny cadet who can barely bench press a standard gravity weight to be the same person who spent last Tuesday turning a Vorthak assault force into very expensive space debris. It's like being a superhero, except instead of a secret identity, you just have really, really bad timing and an unfortunate tendency to be in the wrong place at exactly the right moment. The footage began to play, and I watched myself, though nobody else knew it was me, duck behind a cargo container as plasma bolts sizzled overhead. The camera angle, captured from some lucky surveillance drone that had survived the initial bombardment, showed the loading bay of Kepler Station in all its post-apocalyptic glory. Smoke, sparks, and the occasional explosion provided ambient lighting while yours truly played the galaxy's most dangerous game of hide-and-seek. "Look at that technique," breathed Cadet Willis, leaning forward so far I thought he might fall into the hologram. "See how he's using the environment? Classic asymmetric warfare principles." I nodded sagely, as if I hadn't learned those classic principles approximately 15 minutes before I'd needed to use them, courtesy of a quick battlefield tactics download to my neural implant. Nothing says prepared for combat quite like frantically speed-reading military doctrine while alien death machines try to vaporize your hiding spot. On screen, past me sprinted between cover points with what the Academy would generously call creative interpretation of established movement protocols. Translation. I ran like a caffeinated squirrel through a laser light show, somehow managing not to get myself killed through sheer dumb luck, and the kind of reflexes you only develop when the alternative is becoming a very small pile of ash. "Whoever this is," commented Briggs, "they're making the Vorthak look like Academy freshmen." Which was hilarious, considering that I was an Academy freshman, and the Vorthak were supposedly one of the most feared warrior races in 3 galactic sectors. But here's what the textbooks don't tell you about feared warrior races. They're really, really bad at adapting to completely insane tactical decisions made by someone who clearly hasn't read the same tactical manuals they have. The Vorthak approach warfare like a carefully choreographed dance. Each warrior knows their role, follows established patterns, and executes time-tested strategies with mechanical precision. They're absolutely lethal against opponents who fight back according to the same rulebook. They are considerably less prepared for opponents whose combat strategy can best be described as, what would happen if someone gave weapons to a hyperactive child and then set them loose in a hardware store during an earthquake? On screen, I watched myself jury-rig an improvised explosive device from a maintenance bot's power cell and what appeared to be half the contents of a janitor's supply closet. The explosion took out 3 Vorthak warriors and opened a hole in the station's hull that sucked 2 more into the loving embrace of hard vacuum. "That's not in any manual I've read," observed Willis with something approaching awe. "That's because there is no manual for Desperate Improvisation 101, I wanted to tell him. There's no coursework in Making It Up As You Go Along, or Advanced Panic-Induced Problem Solving. The Academy teaches you proper procedures, established protocols, and time-tested methods. What they don't teach you is what to do when all of those proper procedures involve having more than one person. Established protocols require equipment you don't have, and time-tested methods assume you're not facing down 8-foot-tall crystalline death machines who communicate through subsonic growls and consider negotiation to be a type of cuisine." The hologram showed the battle's climax, where past me had somehow managed to turn the station's artificial gravity generator into a localized weapon. Watching it now, I was honestly impressed with myself, and also mildly horrified, because I could see at least 14 different ways that particular improvisation could have gone catastrophically wrong. "The Vorthak are retreating," announced Briggs unnecessarily, as if we couldn't see the remaining alien warriors booking it toward their landing craft, like their collective pants were on fire. I count, 23 confirmed kills? 24, actually, but who's counting? Besides me, and probably the Vorthak High Command, who were undoubtedly having some very uncomfortable conversations about how a single human had just handed their elite strike team the most embarrassing defeat since the great misunderstanding of Tau Ceti. The footage ended with a shot of me slumped against a bulkhead, looking like I'd just gone 10 rounds with an industrial mixer and lost. Which, considering the state of the station around me, wasn't far from the truth. The camera angle didn't show my face clearly. Another stroke of luck in a day that had been absolutely full of them. 24 confirmed kills, I corrected quietly, because apparently I have some sort of compulsive need to set the record straight, even when it's my own record, and I'm supposed to be keeping it secret. Briggs looked at me with raised eyebrows. You count it differently? I shrugged, trying to look casual. I thought I saw another one go down when the gravity field shifted. Hard to tell with all the smoke. Which was technically true. It was hard to tell, right up until the moment that particular Vorthak warrior face-planted into a bulkhead, hard enough to leave a warrior-shaped dent in the metal plating. Chapter 2. Unwanted Attention. 3 days later, I was beginning to understand why superheroes work so hard to keep their identities secret. It turns out that being an unknown galactic hero is significantly more comfortable than being a known galactic hero, especially when half the known galaxy consists of species who consider honorable single combat to be a form of recreational activity. I discovered this when I found Admiral Kresic waiting outside my dormitory room. Admiral Kresic, for those not familiar with Altarian military hierarchy, stands about 7 feet tall, has 4 arms, skin like metallic scales, and the kind of personality that makes industrial-grade acid seem warm and welcoming by comparison. He also has a reputation for eating junior officers who disappoint him. Metaphorically, probably. Cadet Ellis, he said, his voice carrying that particular harmonic resonance that Altarians use when they're either extremely pleased or about to disintegrate something. Since I'd never seen Admiral Kresic extremely pleased about anything, I was fairly certain I was about to become a small pile of component atoms. Admiral, I managed, snapping to attention with the kind of military precision that only comes from knowing you're in very, very deep trouble. Sir, walk with me. This is never a good sign. When superior officers want to walk with you, it means one of 2 things. Either you're about to receive commendation for extraordinary service, or you're about to receive an extremely personal demonstration of why fraternization with alien species is discouraged in the Academy Handbook. We walked. Admiral Kresic's 4 arms moved in a synchronized pattern as he strode through the corridors, and I noticed that other cadets practically launched themselves out of our path. Smart cadets. I was beginning to wish I'd been smart enough to launch myself out of an airlock before this conversation could happen. Tell me, Cadet Ellis, the Admiral said conversationally. What do you know about the Kepler Station incident? My heart tried to escape through my throat. Only what everyone knows, sir. Single human operative held off a Vorthak war party. Impressive tactical display. Impressive, he repeated, and I couldn't tell if he was agreeing with me or mocking the very concept. 24 confirmed kills against elite Vorthak warriors, utilizing improvised weapons, and what our tactical analysis department has classified as aggressively unconventional strategic thinking. I nodded, trying to project the kind of casual interest that definitely didn't suggest any personal involvement whatsoever. Sounds like someone who really knew what they were doing. Admiral Kresic stopped walking and turned to face me with all 4 arms crossed. When an Altarian crosses all 4 arms, it means they're either deep in thought or about to demonstrate why their species conquered half the Andromeda galaxy before deciding that running a galactic empire was too much paperwork. Someone who really knew what they were doing, he repeated slowly. Cadet Ellis, our analysis indicates that this someone had approximately 15 minutes of formal combat experience before engaging 28 elite warriors in single combat. 15 minutes and 30 seconds, actually. But again, who's counting? That seems unlikely, sir. It seems impossible, Admiral Kresic corrected. It also seems to match perfectly with the skill profile of someone who had just completed their first year of tactical training and possessed the kind of desperate creativity that comes from having absolutely no idea what they're supposed to be doing. I was starting to sweat, which is never a good look when you're trying to maintain plausible deniability. Are you suggesting that a first-year cadet was responsible for the Kepler Station defense? I'm not suggesting anything, Cadet Ellis. I'm stating it as fact, based on comprehensive analysis of the combat footage, cross-referenced with Academy records, correlated with transportation logs, and confirmed through what we in the intelligence community like to call putting two and two together. Well, shit. Sir, You were listed as being on medical leave for exhaustion and minor injuries sustained during a training accident. Admiral Kresick continued, consulting a datapad that had appeared in one of his hands. The timing correlates precisely with the Kepler Station incident. The injury patterns noted in your medical file match those that would be sustained during the kind of combat we observed. And, most conclusively, Lieutenant Vex ran a probability analysis on human combat techniques and determined that there was a 97.3% chance that the operative was either you or your identical twin. I don't have an identical twin, sir. No, you don't. Admiral Kresick's expression managed to convey amusement, despite the fact that Altarians don't really have facial expressions in the way humans understand them, which brings the probability up to 99.8%. I sighed. There's a certain relief that comes with finally being caught, like when you've been holding your breath underwater and finally surface for air. Except in this case, the air might be poisonous and the surface might be covered in very angry alien military officers. What gave me away? I asked. The improvised gravity weapon, Admiral Kresick said immediately. That particular technique was developed by Professor Martinez in her advanced field engineering course. She's only taught it to 12 students over the past 5 years, and you're the only one who was anywhere near Kepler Station last week. I should have known. Professor Martinez and her obsession with creative applications of existing technology. I'd thought it was just another academic exercise. I hadn't expected to need it for actual warfare against actual aliens who were actually trying to kill me. So what happens now? I asked. Because in situations like this, it's generally best to get the bad news over with quickly. Like removing a bandage, except the bandage is your entire future, and removing it might involve being court-martialed for unauthorized military engagement. Admiral Kresick studied me for a long moment, and I got the distinct impression that he was trying to decide whether to recommend me for commendation or for psychiatric evaluation. Now, he said finally, you get a choice. Chapter 3. The Choice. Turns out when you single-handedly prevent an alien war party from capturing a strategic mining station and inadvertently become the poster child for human military effectiveness, your career options expand in ways that career counselors generally don't prepare you for. Option 1, Admiral Kresick explained as we sat in his office, which was decorated with what appeared to be the mounted heads of various alien predators. I tried not to think about whether any of them had been classified as sentient species before they'd been classified as wall decorations. You continue your academy training as planned, he continued. We classify the Kepler Station incident. You sign approximately 47 different non-disclosure agreements, and you spend the next 3 years learning proper military procedure before being assigned to a standard patrol cruiser, where you'll spend the following decade hoping nothing more exciting than a minor piracy incident disturbs your routine. That actually sounded pretty appealing. Routine is undervalued, in my opinion. There's something to be said for knowing that your biggest challenge on any given day will be figuring out whether the mess hall's mystery meat is actually edible or just cleverly disguised cardboard. Option 2, Admiral Kresick said, and his tone suggested that Option 2 was going to be significantly more complicated. You accept an immediate field commission as lieutenant, get assigned to the Galactic Defense Coalition's new Rapid Response Team, and spend the foreseeable future getting dropped into impossible situations where your particular combination of tactical ignorance and creative problem-solving might be the difference between galactic peace and interstellar war. I stared at him. Those are my options, boring routine or constant mortal peril? Essentially, yes. And if I choose Option 2, I'll be working with other people, right? Like actual trained military professionals who know what they're doing? Admiral Kresick's forearms performed what I was learning to recognize as the Altarian equivalent of a shrug. Define trained military professionals. People who have read the tactical manuals. People who know proper procedure. People who won't try to weaponize a gravity generator because they saw it done in a classroom demonstration once. Cadet Ellis, Admiral Kresick said with something that might have been patience, if patience could be weaponized and used to intimidate junior officers. The Galactic Defense Coalition's Rapid Response Team is not comprised of people who follow proper procedure. It's comprised of people who get results when proper procedure isn't an option. He activated a holographic display that showed personnel files for what I assumed were my potential teammates. The first profile belonged to a Centaurian whose listed specialties included demolitions, aggressive negotiation, and something called therapeutic violence. Lieutenant Zorion, Admiral Kresick explained, former mercenary, joined the coalition after his previous employer tried to pay him with counterfeit credits and discovered that Centaurians consider financial fraud to be a form of personal insult requiring immediate and explosive retribution. The next profile showed a human woman whose photograph suggested she could probably bench press a small starship. Her specialties were listed as hand-to-hand combat, advanced interrogation techniques, and creative applications of standard-issue equipment. Lieutenant Hayes, the Admiral continued, former Special Forces, joined the coalition after an incident involving a diplomatic reception, 3 enemy agents, and what the after-action report described as weaponized furniture. I was beginning to see a pattern here, and it wasn't exactly reassuring. The third profile belonged to someone whose species I didn't recognize. They looked vaguely reptilian, but with too many joints and what appeared to be naturally occurring body armor. Lieutenant Vex, Admiral Kresick said, tactical analysis specialist, former intelligence operative, joined the coalition after predicting 17 different security breaches and being told that his recommendations were excessively paranoid and logistically impractical. All 17 breaches occurred within 6 months. Let me guess, I said. He was right about everything and his superiors didn't appreciate being proven wrong? He was right about everything, Admiral Kresick confirmed, and he may have expressed his vindication in ways that required sensitivity training and a formal apology to the diplomatic corps. The pattern was becoming clear. The rapid response team wasn't comprised of the military's best and brightest. It was comprised of the military's most effective misfits. People who got results but couldn't be trusted to follow proper procedure or work well within normal command structures. So essentially, I said, you want to put me on a team of highly trained loose cannons who have been deemed too dangerous or too unconventional for regular military service. That's a remarkably accurate assessment, Admiral Kresick agreed. Although I would add that they're also the people who get called in when regular military service isn't sufficient to handle the situation. I thought about this. On one hand, spending the next 3 years learning proper procedure and then getting assigned to routine patrol duty sounded safe, comfortable, and unlikely to result in my untimely death at the hands of alien war parties. On the other hand, I'd just spent 3 hours proving that proper procedure was highly overrated when properly applied improvisation could get better results. And there was something appealing about working with people who understood that sometimes the best solution to a complex tactical problem was to ignore everything you'd been taught and try something completely insane instead. What kind of missions are we talking about? I asked. Admiral Kresick activated another holographic display, this one showing a star map with various systems highlighted in different colors. Red systems indicated active conflicts, yellow indicated brewing political situations, and green indicated what the Admiral described as routine peacekeeping assignments that have a history of becoming significantly less routine without warning. Last month, he said, the team prevented a trade war between the Rigelian Cooperative and the Andromedian Federation by infiltrating a black market auction, stealing a shipment of illegal weapons, and using said weapons to destroy the facility where they'd been manufactured. That sounds like it created more problems than it solved. On the contrary, it solved several problems that the diplomatic corps hadn't even identified yet. The weapons manufacturer was planning to sell to both sides of the conflict while secretly recording the locations of their military installations. The team's intervention prevented what intelligence analysis suggested would have escalated into a full-scale war involving 6 different species. I had to admit, that did sound like effective problem-solving, even if it probably wasn't covered in any manual of standard operating procedures. What about casualties? I asked. Minimal, Admiral Kresick replied. The team has developed what Lieutenant Vex calls a probability-based approach to conflict resolution. They identify the most likely negative outcomes and work to prevent them through what conventional military doctrine would classify as preemptive action. Preemptive action? They solve problems before the problems become problems, he clarified. It's unconventional, but it's effective. I looked at the personnel files again. Lieutenant Zorayon with his expertise in therapeutic violence. Lieutenant Hayes, who apparently considered furniture to be a viable weapon category. Lieutenant Vex, whose paranoia had turned out to be justified tactical analysis. And then there was me. Cadet Ellis, whose qualification for this position was having accidentally prevented an interstellar incident through a combination of blind panic and creative misuse of mining station equipment. When would I need to decide? I asked. Now, Admiral Kresick said. The team is shipping out tomorrow for what intelligence has classified as a developing situation of undefined scope and potentially significant consequences. What does that mean? It means something is happening. We don't know what it is, but it's probably going to be complicated and definitely going to require the kind of thinking that normal military units aren't trained for. I stared at the holographic displays, thinking about my options. Safe, boring routine, or dangerous, unpredictable adventure with a team of highly skilled misfits who solved problems by ignoring established procedures and making things up as they went along. When I put it like that, there really wasn't much of a choice. I'll take option 2, I said. Admiral Kressick's 4 arms moved in what I was beginning to recognize as satisfaction. Excellent. Report to Hangar Base 7 at 0800 hours tomorrow. And Cadet Ellis? Yes, sir? It's Lieutenant Ellis now. Try not to get your new team killed on your first mission. I'll do my best, sir. See that you do. The paperwork involved in replacing an entire rapid response team is extraordinarily tedious. Chapter 4. Meeting the Team. Hangar Bay 7 turned out to be occupied by a ship that looked like someone had taken a standard military transport, put it through a blender with a stealth fighter and a mobile weapons platform, and then decided that the result needed more armor plating and at least 3 additional gun turrets. "That's the improvisation," said a voice behind me, and I turned to see Lieutenant Hayes approaching with what appeared to be a duffel bag over one shoulder and a weapon case in each hand. She's not much to look at, but she's fast, she's tough, and she's got more redundant systems than a Centaurian worry ship. Lieutenant Hayes looked exactly like her personnel photo, which meant she looked like she could arm wrestle a combat mech and probably win. She was about average height for a human, but built like someone who had decided that standard human musculature was insufficient for her needs, and had taken steps to correct the situation. "Lieutenant Ellis," I said, extending a hand. "New team member." She shook my hand, and I tried not to wince at the grip strength. "Hayes, weapons and tactics. You're the kid who turned Kepler Station into a Vorthak graveyard, right?" "That's me. Nice work." I read the after-action analysis. Very creative use of available resources. She grinned, and the expression somehow made her look even more dangerous. "You're going to fit right in." Before I could respond, an explosion echoed from inside the ship, followed by what sounded like someone swearing in at least 3 different languages, none of which were human. "That'll be Zorian," Hayes said casually, as if explosions were a normal part of pre-flight preparation. "He's making some modifications to the ship's defensive systems." "What kind of modifications?" "The kind that will make enemy boarding actions significantly more hazardous to the enemy's continued existence," said another voice, and I turned to see Lieutenant Vex approaching from the opposite direction. Lieutenant Vex looked exactly like his species suggested he should. Reptilian features, natural armor plating, and more joints than standard human anatomy would suggest was practical. He was carrying what appeared to be a portable computer terminal, and had the kind of focused expression that suggested he was simultaneously running 17 different probability calculations. "Lieutenant Ellis," he said, offering what I assumed was the equivalent of a handshake, a brief contact of clawed fingertips that somehow managed to convey both greeting and tactical assessment. "I've reviewed your service record. Statistically anomalous, but in ways that suggest useful applications rather than dangerous instability." "Thank you," I said, because it seemed like the kind of thing that was probably intended as a compliment. "Your tactical approach at Kepler Station demonstrated what I classify as constructive unpredictability," Vex continued. "Most humans approach combat situations with predetermined strategies based on established doctrine. You approached the situation by analyzing available resources and improvising solutions in real time. I approached the situation by panicking and making things up as I went along," I corrected. "Exactly," Vex said, and his reptilian features arranged themselves into what might have been satisfaction. "Real-time tactical improvisation based on immediate resource analysis. It's a significantly more effective approach than following predetermined strategies that may not account for actual battlefield conditions." Another explosion echoed from inside the ship, this one accompanied by what sounded like satisfied laughter. "Should we be concerned about that?" I asked. "Only if the explosions stop," Hayes replied. "When Zorion stops making noise, it usually means he's finished with the preliminary testing and is ready to move on to the really dangerous modifications." As if summoned by her words, Lieutenant Zorian appeared at the ship's airlock. He was tall, even by Centaurian standards, with the kind of naturally lean build that suggested his species had evolved on a planet where everything was either trying to eat you or explode in your face. He was covered in what appeared to be scorch marks and had the kind of satisfied expression that suggested the explosions had gone exactly as planned. "New team member," he announced, striding over with the kind of confident gait that suggested he was used to walking away from things that had just exploded. "You must be the human who turned gravity into a weapon. I approve of your approach to problem solving. Lieutenant Zorian, I presume?" "Indeed. And you are the famous Lieutenant Ellis, hero of Kepler Station, master of improvised warfare, and according to Vex's analysis, Statistically impossible to kill through conventional means. He grinned, showing teeth that were designed for a species that had evolved to bite through things that normal teeth couldn't handle. We're going to have excellent adventures together. Excellent adventures, I repeated. Zorian has an unusual relationship with danger, Vex explained. He considers life-threatening situations to be recreational activities. Not recreational, Zorian corrected. Educational. Every life-threatening situation teaches you something new about the practical applications of applied violence or improvised explosives. Sometimes both. Hayes nodded approvingly. He once held off an entire pirate fleet by rigging a mining asteroid to explode, and then using the debris field as cover for a fighting retreat that lasted 6 hours. The pirates considered it such an educational experience that they offered me a job, Zorian added proudly. I declined, of course, but I kept the business card. I was starting to understand why Admiral Kresick had described the rapid response team as comprised of misfits. These were people who approached dangerous situations the way normal people approached crossword puzzles, as intellectual challenges that were meant to be solved through creative thinking and unconventional methods. So what's our first mission? I asked. Vex consulted his portable terminal. We're being deployed to investigate what intelligence has classified as anomalous communication patterns, originating from the Tau Epsilon system. What kind of anomalous communication patterns? The kind that suggests someone is broadcasting encrypted messages using quantum entanglement arrays that theoretically don't exist, Vex replied. Also, the messages appear to be in a language that our xenolinguistics department has never encountered. And the system is supposed to be uninhabited, Hayes added. No recorded settlements, no mining operations, no research stations. According to all official records, there's nothing in Tau Epsilon except 3 gas giants and a lot of empty space. So we're going to investigate a mystery signal from an impossible source in an empty system, I summarized. Exactly, Zorian said with obvious enthusiasm. Doesn't that sound like fun? I looked at my new teammates, the demolitions expert who considered explosions to be a form of scientific inquiry, the tactical analyst who had turned paranoia into an art form, and the weapons specialist who apparently viewed furniture as viable combat equipment. They were all looking at me with expressions that suggested they were genuinely excited about flying into a potentially dangerous situation to investigate something that probably shouldn't exist. And despite everything, despite the fact that 3 days ago I'd been a cadet whose biggest concern was passing advanced theoretical tactics, despite the fact that I'd somehow ended up on a team of highly trained misfits, despite the fact that our first mission involved investigating what sounded like a textbook setup for a horror movie, I realized that I was excited too. Yeah, I said. It does sound like fun. Excellent. Zorian clapped me on the shoulder with enough force to rattle my teeth. I knew you'd fit in perfectly. Now come aboard and let me show you the modifications I've made to our defensive systems. I think you'll appreciate the creative applications of standard issue equipment. As we boarded the improvisation, I couldn't help but think that Admiral Kresick had been right about one thing. This definitely wasn't going to be routine. Chapter 5. Into the Unknown. The improvisation turned out to be exactly as advertised. Not much to look at, but equipped with enough redundant systems to keep running, even if half the ship had been shot off. The interior looked like someone had designed a military transport, and then asked a team of engineers to make it better by ignoring budget constraints and safety regulations. Zorian has been modifying her for 3 years, Hayes explained as she gave me a tour of the ship. Every time we complete a mission, he finds new ways to improve our tactical capabilities. The ship's armory looked like a museum of creative violence. In addition to standard-issue weapons, there were devices that I couldn't identify, but which looked like they'd been designed by someone who considered conventional weapons to be insufficiently creative. What's that one? I asked, pointing to something that appeared to be a cross between a rifle and a small nuclear reactor. Plasma caster, Hayes replied. Zorian's design. It fires superheated plasma bolts that can cut through most known armor materials. Also works as an emergency cutting torch, a portable heater, and in extreme situations, a propulsion system. Propulsion system? Point it away from where you want to go and fire continuously. The recoil will eventually push you in the desired direction. Not recommended for extended use, but effective for emergency maneuvering in zero gravity. I was beginning to see a theme in the team's approach to equipment design. Everything had multiple functions, most of which hadn't been considered during the original design phase. The bridge was similarly modified, with additional screens, sensors, and what appeared to be a tactical analysis station that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and creative inspiration. Vex's workstation, Hayes explained. He can run real-time analysis on anything from communications intercepts to enemy tactical patterns to the probability that our current mission will result in what he classifies as educational casualties. Educational casualties? Injuries that teach you not to do something again, Vex said from his station, where he was already reviewing data about our destination, as opposed to fatal casualties, which provide no educational value due to the subject's inability to benefit from the learning experience. How often do we experience educational casualties? I asked. Rarely, Vex replied. Our approach to mission planning is designed to minimize unnecessary risk while maximizing the probability of successful objective completion. In other words, Hayes translated, we're very good at not getting killed, even when we're doing things that should probably get us killed. The ship's flight deck was occupied by Zorion, who was simultaneously piloting us out of the Academy's orbital dock and making last-minute adjustments to what appeared to be the navigation system. How long until we reach Tau Epsilon? I asked. 12 hours at our current speed, Zorion replied without looking up from his modifications. But I've been working on improvements to our quantum drive efficiency. We should be able to make the trip in 8 hours, assuming the modifications don't cause a cascade failure that tears a hole in space-time. Should I be concerned about the possibility of tearing a hole in space-time? I asked. Only if you're philosophically opposed to contributing to scientific advancement, Zorion replied cheerfully. The theoretical models suggest that any holes we create will be temporary and self-sealing. The theoretical models, Vex added from his station, also suggest a 4.7% chance of catastrophic failure resulting in the ship being distributed across several dimensions simultaneously. That seems like an unacceptably high risk, I said. 4.7% is well within acceptable parameters for experimental technology, Zorion countered. Besides, conventional quantum drives have a 3.2% chance of catastrophic failure under normal operating conditions. We're only increasing our risk by 1.5% in exchange for a 33% reduction in travel time. That's actually not bad math, I admitted. Zorion may be enthusiastic about experimental modifications, Hayes said, but he's very good at risk assessment. He's never killed anyone accidentally. What about on purpose? I asked. Well, that's different, Zorion said. People who try to kill me first have made an informed decision to accept the associated risks. I was starting to understand that the team operated according to their own version of logic, which seemed to work well for them even if it wouldn't be covered in any standard military procedure manual. So what do we know about these mysterious signals? I asked, settling into what appeared to be the ship's fourth seat, which had been added to the bridge presumably to accommodate additional team members. Vex activated a holographic display showing the Tau Epsilon system. 3 gas giants orbited a standard yellow star with the usual collection of moons and asteroid debris scattered throughout the system. The signals began approximately 72 hours ago, he explained. They're being transmitted using quantum entanglement arrays, which suggests a highly advanced technological civilization. But the system is supposed to be uninhabited, I said. Correct. Comprehensive surveys conducted over the past 50 years have identified no signs of technological civilization, no artificial structures, and no energy signatures consistent with advanced technology. So either someone moved in very recently, Hayes said, or they've been hiding there all along and only now decided to announce their presence. Or, Zorion added with obvious enthusiasm, we're about to discover something completely new and potentially dangerous, which would make this an educational opportunity of the highest order. The signal content analysis is particularly interesting, Vex continued, manipulating the holographic display to show a series of complex waveforms. The language patterns don't match any known linguistic structures, but the mathematical foundations suggest a highly sophisticated understanding of quantum mechanics and what our physics department classifies as theoretical applications of space-time manipulation. They're talking about manipulating space-time? I asked. They're talking about something, Vex corrected. Whether that something is manipulation of space-time, theoretical physics, or recipes for exotic matter cuisine is unclear without additional context. Exotic matter cuisine? I repeated. It's happened before, Hayes said dryly. We once spent 3 days investigating what intelligence classified as potentially hostile technological transmissions that turned out to be cooking shows broadcast by a colony of retired scientists. The mathematical formulations were remarkably similar to weapons research. Vex added defensively. Advanced culinary chemistry requires precise molecular manipulation techniques. Anyway, Zorion interrupted. We'll find out what they're talking about when we get there. In the meantime, you should familiarize yourself with our standard operating procedures. We have standard operating procedures? I asked. Of course we do, Hayes replied. Rule 1, don't get killed. Rule 2, complete the mission objective. Rule 3, if rules 1 and 2 conflict, use creative problem solving to find a solution that accomplishes both. That's it? That's it, Zorion confirmed. Everything else is situational adaptation based on available resources and immediate tactical requirements. What he means, Vex translated, is that we make it up as we go along, but we're very good at it. I had to admit, there was something refreshingly honest about that approach. Most military procedures were designed for situations that fit neatly into predetermined categories. But real combat situations, as I'd learned at Kepler Station, rarely cooperated with predetermined categories. So what's our approach for this mission? I asked. Standard reconnaissance protocol, Hayes explained. We enter the system, maintain stealth profile, conduct passive sensor sweeps, and gather intelligence about the source of the transmissions. And if we're detected? Improvise, Zorion said cheerfully. And if the source turns out to be hostile? Improvise more creatively, Hayes added. And if the situation exceeds our tactical capabilities? That, Vex said with something that might have been satisfaction, has not yet occurred. Chapter 6, The Discovery. 8 hours later, and without tearing any holes in space-time, much to everyone's mild disappointment, we dropped out of quantum drive at the edge of the Tau Epsilon system. The improvisation sensors immediately began passive scanning while we maintained what Zorion optimistically described as a tactically invisible position behind the system's largest asteroid. Sensors are picking up the signal source, Vex announced from his station. Origin point appears to be... That's interesting. What's interesting? I asked. Though experience was already teaching me that when Vex said something was interesting, it usually meant we were about to discover something that would complicate our lives in unexpected ways. The signals are originating from the second gas giant's largest moon, he explained, manipulating the holographic display to show a closer view. But according to the sensor readings, the moon doesn't exist. Explain, Hayes said in the tone of voice that suggested she was already reaching for her weapons. Passive sensors indicate a moon with standard mass, gravitational field, and orbital characteristics, Vex continued. But visual sensors show empty space. The moon is simultaneously there and not there. Cloaking device? I suggested. Possibly, but if so, it's using technology that our sensors can't penetrate. We're detecting gravitational effects from an object that we can't see, hear, or observe through any conventional means. That's not possible, I said. Actually, Zorion said with growing excitement, it's theoretically possible if someone has developed practical applications of quantum superposition on a planetary scale. Quantum superposition? The moon exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously, Vex explained. From our perspective, it both exists and doesn't exist until we directly interact with it and force it to collapse into a single state. I tried to process this. That's completely insane. It's also brilliant, Zorion said admiringly. Imagine the tactical applications. You could hide entire civilizations by keeping them in quantum superposition. Undetectable until you choose to interact with them, or until they choose to interact with you, Hayes pointed out grimly. As if summoned by her words, our communications array suddenly activated. A voice speaking in what was definitely not any human language filled the bridge, but somehow I found myself understanding every word. Attention unknown vessel. Your approach has been noted. State your intentions and origin. We all looked at each other. First contact situations were definitely not covered in our 3-rule standard operating procedure. Anyone know how they're managing universal translation? I asked. Quantum entanglement communication arrays can carry translation matrices, Vex said. They're transmitting the linguistic data directly into our communication system. Should we respond? Hayes asked. Well, Zorion said thoughtfully, we are here to investigate mysterious signals. It seems like talking to the people sending the signals would be a logical first step. I found myself nominated as spokesman, presumably because I was the new guy, and therefore expendable if the first contact went badly. This is Lieutenant Ellis of the Galactic Defense Coalition vessel Improvisation, I said, trying to sound official and non-threatening simultaneously. We're investigating unusual communication patterns originating from this system. Lieutenant Ellis, the voice replied, and there was something in the tone that suggested amusement. We have been monitoring galactic communications networks. You are the human responsible for the Kepler station incident. How do you know about that? I asked, temporarily forgetting that this was supposed to be a diplomatic exchange. Your tactical approach was educational. We have studied the combat footage with considerable interest. Great, Hayes muttered. We're famous. You are indeed famous, the voice continued, apparently having no trouble picking up Hayes' comment despite her efforts to speak quietly. Your species' approach to impossible tactical situations has garnered significant attention among those who study warfare. Those who study warfare? Vex repeated, and I could see him running probability calculations. We are researchers, the voice explained. Our specialty is the analysis of combat techniques developed by species facing overwhelming odds. Your species has provided particularly interesting case studies. Case studies? I asked. Humans have a remarkable tendency to achieve tactical victory through methods that conventional military analysis would classify as impossible. The voice continued. We have been studying this phenomenon for some time. You've been studying us? Hayes demanded, and her tone suggested that she was not particularly pleased about being the subject of alien research. Not specifically your species. We study all species that demonstrate unusual tactical capabilities. The Vorthak interest us for their systematic approach to warfare. The Centaurians fascinate us with their creative applications of demolition techniques. The Altarians provide excellent examples of multi-dimensional strategic thinking. And humans? I asked. Humans, the voice said with unmistakable satisfaction, excel at what we have classified as successful tactical impossibility. Chapter 7. The Invitation. Successful tactical impossibility? I repeated. The ability to achieve victory through methods that mathematical analysis suggests should not work. The voice explained. Your species consistently develops solutions to tactical problems that violate established principles of military science, yet achieve superior results compared to conventional approaches. They're saying we're good at making stuff up, Hayes translated. They're saying we're good at making stuff up that works, Zorion corrected with obvious pride. We would like to invite you aboard our research facility. The voice continued. Your recent experiences would be valuable additions to our ongoing studies. Research facility? Vex asked, consulting his sensors. We're still not detecting any artificial structures. You are detecting our facility, the voice replied. You simply cannot observe it directly due to its current quantum state. If you accept our invitation, we will adjust our phase variance to allow physical interaction. They want to shift their invisible moon base into our reality so we can dock with it, I translated. That is a reasonably accurate summary, the voice agreed. We looked at each other. On one hand, accepting an invitation from mysterious aliens who had been secretly studying galactic military techniques seemed like the kind of decision that could easily result in what Vex would classify as educational casualties. On the other hand, we were here to investigate mysterious signals, and it turned out the mysterious signals were coming from aliens who wanted to talk to us about military tactics. As first contact scenarios went, it could have been much worse. What kind of research are you conducting? Hayes asked. Comparative tactical analysis, the voice replied. We study the warfare techniques of various species to better understand the relationship between technological advancement and creative problem solving. Are you planning to use this information for military purposes? Vex asked, because someone had to ask the obvious question. We are scientists, the voice replied. Our interest in warfare is purely academic. We seek to understand why some species develop innovative tactical approaches, while others rely solely on technological superiority or numerical advantage. And you think humans are particularly good at innovative tactics? I asked. We think humans are particularly good at tactical approaches that should not work but do, the voice corrected. This represents a fascinating anomaly that deserves further study. I say we accept the invitation, Zorion announced. When will we get another opportunity to visit an interdimensional research station operated by aliens who study military tactics? Never, probably, Hayes agreed. And if they wanted to capture or kill us, they could have done it already. We can't even see their base. The probability analysis supports accepting the invitation, Vex added. They demonstrate superior technology, but their stated intentions are consistent with peaceful research objectives. I found myself making the decision for the team, which was apparently one of the responsibilities that came with being the guy who had accidentally become famous for turning a mining station into a battlefield. We accept your invitation, I said. Excellent. Please maintain your current position while we adjust our phase variance. The empty space ahead of us began to shimmer, and gradually a structure began to materialize. It started as a faint outline, like something seen through heat distortion, and slowly became more solid until we found ourselves looking at what could only be described as a research station designed by people who had never heard of conventional architecture. The station was built into and around the gas giant's moon, with structures that seemed to flow organically from the lunar surface. Crystalline towers twisted upward in spirals that definitely hadn't been designed by human engineers, while what appeared to be docking bays opened like flowers blooming from the moon's surface. Now that, Zorian said with obvious appreciation, is impressive engineering. Confirmed artificial gravity fields, Vex reported. Atmospheric containment shields, and power generation systems that our sensors can't identify. They're hailing us again, I announced as the communications array activated. Welcome to Research Station Epsilon, the voice said. Please dock at Bay 7. Our research team is eager to meet you. Research team? Hayes asked. We are a collaborative effort, the voice explained. Multiple species working together to advance our understanding of tactical innovation. As we approached the docking bay, I could see figures waiting to greet us. Even from a distance, it was obvious that they represented several different species, none of which I recognized from standard galactic databases. This is either going to be the most fascinating first contact in Coalition history, I said, or we're about to become research subjects ourselves. Perhaps both, Vex observed. Either way, Zorian added cheerfully. It's definitely going to be educational. Chapter 8. The Researchers. The docking bay pressurized around us with efficiency that suggested technology well beyond standard galactic norms. As we disembarked from the improvisation, we were greeted by what could only be described as a reception committee of beings that looked like they'd been assembled from a xenobiologist's fever dream. Our original contact turned out to be a tall, ethereal-looking being with features that seemed to shift slightly whenever I wasn't looking directly at them. They introduced themselves as Dr. Quell, head of the Tactical Innovation Research Project. Lieutenant Ellis, Dr. Quell said, extending what might have been a hand or possibly a manipulator appendage. Your reputation precedes you. We've been following your career with great interest since the Kepler Station incident. My career? I asked. I've been in the military for exactly 4 days. Yes, but what remarkable days they have been, Dr. Quell replied. From academy cadet to tactical hero to member of an elite rapid response team. Your career trajectory is statistically unprecedented. That's one way to put it, Hayes muttered. The other members of the research team were equally unusual. Dr. Synthesis appeared to be some kind of crystalline being whose body contained what looked like flowing energy patterns. Professor Helix looked vaguely insectoid, but with too many limbs and an exoskeleton that seemed to be partially organic, partially technological. We represent several species that have transcended conventional warfare, Dr. Quell explained, as they led us through corridors that seemed to be carved from living crystal. Our civilizations have moved beyond the need for military conflict, but we maintain academic interest in the tactical developments of younger species. Younger species? Zorian asked. Species that are still actively engaged in warfare, Professor Helix clarified, their voice somehow emerging from speakers that seemed to be integrated into the walls themselves. Your Galactic Defense Coalition represents a fascinating example of multi-species military cooperation. We study warfare so that others may avoid it, Dr. Synthesis added, their crystalline form pulsing with patterns of light that seem to correspond to speech. By understanding how tactical innovation develops, we hope to identify ways to resolve conflicts before they require military solutions. We were led into what appeared to be an observation deck with a view that shouldn't have been possible. Through transparent walls, we could see not just the gas giant we were orbiting, but star systems, battles in progress, and what appeared to be real-time displays of military exercises being conducted by various species across the galaxy. How are you monitoring all of this? Vex asked, his analytical mind clearly working overtime to process what he was seeing. Quantum observation networks, Dr. Quell explained. We can observe events throughout the galaxy without directly interfering. It allows us to study tactical developments as they occur. I tried to process the implications. That's an incredibly powerful surveillance capability, which we use solely for research purposes, Professor Helix assured me. We have no interest in political or military intervention. We merely observe and analyze. And what have you learned from observing human tactics? Hayes asked. Dr. Synthesis pulsed with what appeared to be excitement. Humans demonstrate a unique approach to tactical problem-solving. Most species develop either technological solutions or numerical superiority solutions. Humans consistently develop what we classify as environmental manipulation solutions. Environmental manipulation? I asked. You use your surroundings as weapons, Dr. Quell explained. The Kepler Station incident is a perfect example. Rather than relying on superior firepower or defensive positions, you transformed the station itself into a tactical asset. I just used what was available, I said. Exactly, Professor Helix said with obvious enthusiasm. Most species would have attempted to fight the Vorthak using conventional weapons and tactics. You recognized that the station's systems could be repurposed as weapons and implemented solutions that the Vorthak couldn't predict because they weren't following any established tactical doctrine. It's a remarkably effective approach, Doctor. Synthesis added. We've observed similar patterns in human military history. Your species consistently achieves tactical victory by using methods that enemy forces haven't prepared for. Because we make it up as we go along, Hayes said. Because you adapt to circumstances rather than following predetermined strategies, Dr. Quell corrected. It's a form of tactical intelligence that most species develop only after centuries of military experience. Humans seem to possess it instinctively. Vex was studying the observation displays with intense concentration. These monitoring capabilities would provide unprecedented tactical intelligence. You could predict conflicts before they develop. We could, Professor Helix agreed. But prediction implies intervention, and intervention would compromise our research objectivity. You're watching galactic conflicts for scientific purposes, I said, but you're not doing anything to prevent them. We cannot prevent them without becoming participants, Dr. Quell explained. And participants cannot conduct objective analysis of the conflicts they're involved in. I struggled to find the right words. That seems like a morally questionable position. Scientific objectivity requires observational distance, Dr. Synthesis said, their crystalline form shifting to what might have been a defensive posture. Intervention would compromise our data. Your data, Hayes said flatly, consists of watching people get killed. The three researchers exchanged what appeared to be meaningful looks, though it was hard to tell with beings whose emotional expressions didn't follow human norms. Perhaps, Dr. Quell said carefully, you would be interested in seeing our tactical simulation facilities. We've constructed detailed recreations of historical battles that allow us to test theoretical tactical variations. Chapter 9. The tactical simulation facility turned out to be a vast chamber filled with holographic projectors that could apparently recreate any battle in galactic history with perfect accuracy. As we entered, the room was currently displaying what appeared to be a space battle between two fleets I didn't recognize. The Battle of Centauri Prime, Professor Helix explained. A classic example of technological superiority overcoming tactical innovation. The hegemony forces outnumbered the Centaurian defenders 3-1 and possessed superior firepower. We watched as the simulation played out, showing Centaurian ships using increasingly desperate tactics to hold off the larger fleet. It was like watching a chess match where one player was down to a few pieces while the other still had most of their board. The Centaurians lost, Synthesis observed, but their defensive tactics delayed the hegemony advance long enough for reinforcements to arrive in the next system. Tactical defeat, strategic victory. Can you run simulations with different parameters? Zorian asked, his demolitions expert mind clearly working on something. Certainly, Dr. Quell replied. What did you have in mind? Show me the same battle, but with human tactical approaches applied to the Centaurian defense. The simulation reset, and this time the Centaurian ships began employing tactics that looked distinctly human. Instead of fighting a traditional defensive action, they began using their superior knowledge of the local system to turn the environment into a weapon. Asteroids became improvised missiles. The system's gas giant was used to mask ship movements. The local star's solar radiation was somehow weaponized to disrupt enemy sensors. Fascinating, Professor Helix murmured as the simulation played out. Human tactical approaches transform a defensive action into an environmental manipulation exercise. The simulated battle ended with the hegemony fleet in retreat, their superior numbers and firepower rendered useless by tactics they hadn't anticipated. Now show me what would happen if the hegemony forces had adapted to human tactical approaches, Vex said, his analytical mind already working on the next logical question. The simulation reset again, this time with both fleets employing human-style environmental manipulation. The result was chaos, a battle that quickly escalated beyond anything resembling conventional warfare, as both sides tried to out-improvise each other. The battle becomes unpredictable, Dr. Quell observed. Neither side can maintain tactical advantage because both sides are constantly adapting to new situations. Which is exactly what human warfare is like, Hayes pointed out. Controlled chaos, where victory goes to whoever can adapt fastest. It's also extraordinarily resource-intensive, Dr. Synthesis noted. This style of warfare consumes materials and energy at rates that would be unsustainable for most civilizations. Unless you're fighting for survival, I said. When the alternative is extinction, resource efficiency becomes less important than tactical effectiveness. An interesting point, Dr. Quell said. Most species develop efficient warfare techniques designed to minimize resource consumption. Humans develop effective warfare techniques designed to maximize enemy resource consumption. We don't just try to win, Zorian observed. We try to make it too expensive for the enemy to keep fighting. Exactly, Professor Helix said with obvious excitement. Human warfare is fundamentally economic. You don't just defeat enemy forces, you make continued resistance economically impossible. Can you show us some of the other species you study? I asked. Dr. Quell manipulated the simulation controls, and the display changed to show what appeared to be a battle between two fleets of ships I'd never seen before. The architects, Dr. Synthesis explained. They approach warfare as an engineering problem. Every battle is planned with mathematical precision, and they construct their military forces like building projects. The simulated battle showed fleets maneuvering in perfect geometric formations, with each ship fulfilling a specific role in what appeared to be a carefully choreographed performance. Very efficient, Vex observed. No wasted motion, minimal resource consumption, predictable outcomes based on force ratios. And completely ineffective against opponents who don't follow the same tactical principles, Hayes added, watching as the simulation showed what happened when architect forces encountered human tactics. The result was predictably chaotic, with the architect forces unable to adapt to tactics that didn't follow their mathematical models. The architects are highly effective against opponents who fight according to established principles, Professor Helix explained. But they struggle against tactical innovation because their strategic models can't account for impossible solutions. What about the Vorthak? I asked, curiosity overcoming my better judgment. The simulation changed to show Vorthak forces in action, and I found myself watching a recreation of tactics I'd personally experienced on Kepler Station. The Vorthak represent perfect military coordination, Dr. Quell explained. Each warrior knows their role precisely, and they execute complex tactical maneuvers with flawless precision. They're also completely predictable, I said, watching the simulation and remembering how I'd been able to anticipate their movements. They follow established patterns that you can learn to counter, which is why a single human with improvised weapons was able to defeat an entire Vorthak war party, Dr. Synthesis observed. Your tactics were impossible to predict because they weren't based on any established doctrine. I was making it up as I went along, I reminded them. Yes, Dr. Quell said with what appeared to be satisfaction. Real-time tactical innovation based on immediate environmental analysis. It's a capability that most military theorists consider impossible to develop systematically. But you think humans can do it systematically? Hayes asked. We think humans do it instinctively, Professor Helix replied. Your species appears to possess inherent tactical creativity that other species require centuries of military experience to develop. So what's your theory? Zorion asked. Why are humans different? The three researchers exchanged those meaningful looks again. That, Dr. Quell said carefully, is what we're hoping to determine. Chapter 10. The Test. We would like to conduct an experiment, Dr. Synthesis announced, their crystalline form shifting to patterns that suggested anticipation. A tactical simulation designed to test our theories about human tactical innovation. What kind of experiment? Vex asked, though his tone suggested he was already running probability calculations about why this was a bad idea. We want to observe human tactical decision-making under controlled conditions, Professor Helix explained. The simulation would present impossible tactical scenarios and record how human operators develop solutions. Define impossible, Hayes said suspiciously. Scenarios where conventional military analysis indicates no possible victory conditions, Dr. Quell explained. Situations where established tactical doctrine suggests that defeat is mathematically inevitable. So you want to put us in simulated no-win scenarios to see what we do? I asked. Exactly. We hypothesize that humans will develop tactical solutions that our mathematical models indicate should not work, but which will nevertheless achieve victory conditions through methods that violate established military principles. That sounds like a fancy way of saying you want to watch us panic and make things up, Hayes observed. Yes, Dr. Synthesis agreed with obvious enthusiasm. Real-time tactical improvisation under extreme pressure is exactly what we want to observe. I looked at my teammates. Zorion appeared to be practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of impossible tactical challenges. Vex was clearly intrigued by the scientific implications. Hayes looked like she was calculating how many different ways the experiment could go wrong, but also seemed interested in proving that human tactics were superior to alien mathematical models. "What kind of scenarios are we talking about?" I asked. Dr. Quell activated the simulation chamber, and holographic displays began showing various tactical situations. Single ship versus entire fleet. Small ground force versus overwhelming enemy numbers. Defense of indefensible positions against superior technology. Basically, Professor Helix added, every situation where conventional analysis would recommend immediate surrender. "And you think we'll find ways to win anyway?" Zorion asked. "We think you'll find ways that shouldn't work but will work anyway," Dr. Synthesis corrected. Human tactical approaches consistently violate mathematical probability models while achieving superior results. "We're basically laboratory mice in a maze," Hayes said. "Except the maze is designed to be impossible to solve." "Laboratory mice that consistently solve impossible mazes," Dr. Quell pointed out. "Which is why your solutions would be scientifically valuable." I found myself making another command decision. What do we get out of participating in your experiment? The three researchers conferred briefly in what sounded like mathematical equations expressed as musical tones. "Knowledge," Dr. Quell finally said. "We will share our tactical analysis data with you. Everything we've learned about military strategies used by every species we've studied. That's," Vex began, then stopped to calculate the implications. "That would be the most comprehensive tactical database in galactic history." "It would give the Coalition significant military advantages," Professor Helix agreed. "Understanding how every known species approaches warfare would provide unprecedented strategic intelligence." "And all we have to do is participate in some tactical simulations?" I asked. "All you have to do," Dr. Synthesis said, "is demonstrate the tactical impossibility that makes human warfare so effective." "When you put it like that," Zorion said, "how can we refuse?" "I can think of several ways," Hayes muttered, but she was already moving toward the simulation controls. Chapter 11. The Impossible Scenario. The first simulation scenario appeared around us, and I immediately understood why the researchers considered it impossible. We were standing on the bridge of a single Coalition frigate, facing a holographic display that showed 17 enemy dreadnoughts approaching our position. "Scenario parameters," Dr. Quell announced. "Single ship, minimal armament, no backup, no reinforcements. Enemy fleet possesses overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. Conventional tactical analysis indicates zero probability of survival, much less victory." "What are our objectives?" Vex asked, already analyzing the tactical display. "Prevent the enemy fleet from reaching the civilian colony in the system's inner orbit," Professor Helix explained. "The colony cannot be evacuated in time to avoid catastrophic casualties." I studied the simulation parameters. 17 dreadnoughts against 1 frigate. No backup. No reinforcements. No realistic possibility of surviving long enough to matter. "This is completely impossible," Hayes observed. "That's the point," Dr. Synthesis said with obvious satisfaction. "Conventional military doctrine would recommend immediate withdrawal to preserve ship and crew for future operations." "Except withdrawal means the colony gets destroyed," I said. "Correct." "The scenario is designed to present a choice between tactical self-preservation and strategic failure. So we need to find a way to stop 17 dreadnoughts with 1 frigate," Zorion said, and his expression suggested he was already working on several different approaches to the problem. I looked at the tactical display again, trying to think like I had at Kepler Station. "Don't think about proper procedures. Think about available resources. Think about what the enemy isn't expecting." "What's the system composition?" I asked. Vex consulted the simulation data. "Standard system. 1 star, 4 planets, asteroid belt between the 3rd and 4th orbits, various moons and debris fields." "And the colony is on the 2nd planet?" "Correct." "So the enemy fleet has to come through the system to reach the colony," I said, thinking out loud. "They're following a predictable course." "Predictable but tactically sound," Professor Helix observed. "The most direct route minimizes exposure to potential ambush sites." "Unless the ambush site is the route itself," Hayes said, catching on to where my thinking was going. "Explain," Dr. Quell requested. I activated the tactical display and began highlighting system features. "The asteroid belt. It's between us and the colony, which means the enemy fleet has to go through it or around it. The belt doesn't provide sufficient cover for defensive operations," Vex pointed out. "The asteroids are too small and too dispersed to interfere with dreadnought operations." "Not as individual asteroids," I agreed. "But what if they weren't individual asteroids?" "Elaborate," Dr. Synthesis requested, their crystalline form shifting to what appeared to be intense attention. I began running calculations on the simulation's physics engine. The asteroid belt represents millions of tons of material in a roughly stable orbit. What would happen if we destabilized that orbit? Zorion's eyes lit up with understanding. You want to collapse the asteroid belt? I want to turn the asteroid belt into a weapon, I corrected. If we can destabilize the orbital mechanics, we can create a debris field that extends across the entire system. Vex ran quick calculations. That would require enormous amounts of energy, more than a single frigate could generate. Not if we use the system's existing energy sources, I said, highlighting the star on the display. Solar radiation, gravitational forces, orbital mechanics. We don't need to generate the energy, we just need to redirect it. How? Hayes asked. I began sketching out a plan on the tactical display. We use our ship's engines to nudge key asteroids out of stable orbit. The gravitational disruption creates a cascade effect that destabilizes the entire belt. Within a few hours, we have a debris field that extends across the system's primary shipping lanes. The enemy fleet would be forced to navigate through a constantly shifting obstacle field, Professor Helix observed. Or go around it, which would add days to their transit time, Vex added. Or, Zorion said with growing enthusiasm, we could make the debris field actively hostile. How do you make space debris hostile? Dr. Quell asked. By adding explosives to key asteroids before we destabilize their orbits, Zorion explained. When the debris field forms, we'll have improvised mines scattered throughout the system. That's... Dr. Synthesis paused, apparently running their own calculations. That's completely insane. That's completely brilliant, Hayes corrected. We turn the entire system into a weapon. 1 frigate versus 17 dreadnoughts, I said, activating the simulation's execution protocols. But it's not really 1 frigate versus 17 dreadnoughts. It's 17 dreadnoughts versus an entire star system that's trying to kill them. The simulation began to run, showing our frigate moving through the asteroid belt and implementing the plan. Within hours, the belt began to destabilize, creating an expanding debris field that filled the space between the outer system and the colony. The enemy fleet, faced with navigating through a constantly shifting field of explosive debris, was forced to reduce speed and maintain defensive formations. What should have been a 6-hour transit became a 3-day ordeal that gave the colony time to evacuate and allowed coalition reinforcements to arrive. Impossible scenario resolved, the simulation announced. Enemy objectives failed. Colony preserved. Friendly forces preserved. The 3 researchers stared at the simulation results in what appeared to be amazement. The mathematical probability of that tactical approach succeeding was less than 2%, Dr. Synthesis finally said. But it worked, Hayes pointed out. It worked because you ignored the conventional parameters of the engagement, Professor Helix observed. Instead of fighting 17 dreadnoughts, you changed the nature of the battlefield until the 17 dreadnoughts were fighting the battlefield itself. Environmental manipulation, Dr. Quell said with obvious satisfaction. Exactly as we hypothesized. Humans don't just adapt to tactical situations, they reshape tactical situations to favor their capabilities. Can we try another scenario? Zorion asked eagerly. Chapter 12, Pattern Recognition. 3 scenarios later, the researchers had recorded what they described as unprecedented examples of tactical impossibility in practice. We'd defended an indefensible colony by turning its industrial infrastructure into a planetary defense system, held off an overwhelming ground assault by weaponizing the local weather patterns, and somehow managed to win a space battle by using quantum communication arrays to create what amounted to holographic decoy fleets. Every solution, Dr. Synthesis observed, reviewing the data from our simulations, follows the same basic pattern. You identify resources that weren't designed for military applications and repurpose them as tactical assets. It's what humans do, Hayes said with a shrug. We use whatever's available. But most species define available resources as military equipment. Professor Helix pointed out, you define available resources as everything in the observable universe. That's because humans evolved on a planet that was trying to kill them, Vex observed. Your survival instincts are based on using any possible resource to overcome environmental challenges. Earth wasn't trying to kill us, I protested. Your planet has predators that hunt in packs, weather patterns that can destroy entire regions, geological instability that can level cities, and an ecosystem where everything is either trying to eat something else or avoid being eaten, Dr. Quell said. From a galactic perspective, Earth is classified as a Class 7 death world. Class 7? I repeated. Out of 10 classifications, Dr. Synthesis explained. Most species evolve on Class 3 or Class 4 worlds with stable climates and predictable environmental conditions. Class 7 worlds are considered barely habitable, which explains why humans develop survival instincts based on environmental manipulation. Professor Helix added, "Your species learned to use any available resource to overcome impossible odds because that was the only way to survive." So you're saying that human tactical innovation is just an extension of human survival instincts? Hayes asked. We're saying that human tactical innovation is the military application of survival skills that most species never needed to develop, Dr. Quell corrected. I thought about this. It made sense, actually. The same creative problem-solving that had helped early humans survive on a planet full of dangerous predators and unpredictable natural disasters was exactly what I'd used at Kepler Station and in the simulations. What are the implications for galactic military doctrine? Vex asked, his analytical mind already working through the strategic consequences. Significant, Dr. Quell replied. If human tactical approaches can be systematized and taught to other species, it would revolutionize military strategy throughout the galaxy. Can they be systematized? I asked. I mean, most of what we do is making it up as we go along. That's exactly what makes it systematic, Professor Helix explained. Your approach to tactical problem-solving follows consistent principles, even when the specific solutions are improvised. Dr. Synthesis manipulated their crystalline form to project a holographic display showing our simulation results. Pattern analysis indicates that human tactical innovation operates according to identifiable rules. Resource identification, environmental analysis, creative repurposing, and adaptive implementation. You're saying there's a method to our madness? Hayes asked. We're saying your madness is methodical, Dr. Quell corrected, which means it can potentially be taught to other species. That would change everything, Zorion said with obvious excitement. Imagine if every species in the Coalition could approach warfare like humans do. Or, Vex said more cautiously, imagine if hostile species learned to approach warfare like humans do. That was a sobering thought. The tactical advantages that made humans effective against conventional opponents would disappear if everyone started using the same approaches. Which brings us to our proposal, Professor Helix announced. Proposal? I asked. We would like to establish a formal research partnership with the Galactic Defense Coalition, Dr. Synthesis explained. We provide our tactical analysis database and research facilities. You provide ongoing examples of human tactical innovation. What kind of ongoing examples? Hayes asked suspiciously. Field testing, Dr. Quell said. Real-world application of human tactical approaches to actual military situations. We observe and analyze. You demonstrate practical applications. You want us to be your field research team, I said. We want you to be yourselves, Professor Helix corrected. The Rapid Response Team already conducts missions that require unconventional tactical approaches. We simply want to observe and learn from your methods. And in exchange, we get access to your tactical database? Vex asked. Complete access, Dr. Synthesis confirmed. Everything we've learned about military strategies, technological capabilities, and tactical preferences for every species we've studied. I looked at my teammates. The offer was incredibly tempting. Access to that kind of tactical intelligence would give the Coalition enormous strategic advantages. But something about the arrangement bothered me. What aren't you telling us? I asked. The three researchers exchanged those meaningful looks again. Our research has identified a potential threat, Dr. Quell said carefully. A species that appears to be developing tactical approaches similar to human methods, but with significantly more advanced technology. Another species that fights like humans? Hayes asked. A species that appears to be learning to fight like humans, Professor Helix corrected. They've been observing galactic conflicts and adapting their tactics based on successful human strategies. That doesn't sound like a coincidence, Vex observed. It isn't, Dr. Synthesis said grimly. They call themselves the synthesizers. They study other species' tactical approaches and integrate the most effective methods into their own military doctrine. And they've been studying human tactics? I asked. Extensively. They were particularly interested in the Kepler Station incident. Great. Not only was I famous throughout the galaxy for accidentally becoming a tactical hero, but now hostile aliens were studying my improvised combat techniques to improve their own military effectiveness. What kind of threat level are we talking about? Zorion asked. Unknown, Dr. Quell replied. They possess technology that our sensors cannot fully analyze. Their tactical capabilities appear to combine the environmental manipulation approaches of human warfare with technological resources that exceed anything in our database. Humans with better equipment, Hayes summarized. Humans with better equipment and no moral constraints about how they use it, Professor Helix corrected. So you want us to help you figure out how to counter tactics based on our own methods? I asked. We want to understand human tactical innovation well enough to predict how it might be corrupted or perverted by species with different ethical frameworks, Dr. Synthesis explained. That made sense, actually. If someone was going to weaponize human tactical creativity, it would be useful to understand how those tactics could be countered. When do we start? I asked. Chapter 13. The New Mission. 6 hours later, we were back aboard the improvisation with a passenger manifest that would have given Coalition intelligence nightmares. Doctor! Quell had volunteered to serve as our embedded researcher, which meant we now had a member of an advanced alien species aboard our ship to observe our tactical decision-making processes. This is either going to be incredibly educational, Zorion said as he ran pre-flight diagnostics, or it's going to get us court-martialed for unauthorized alien collaboration. Probably both, Hayes agreed, checking the weapons systems that had been upgraded with some of the research station's technology. But the tactical database access alone makes it worth the risk. Dr. Quell had taken up residence in what used to be our cargo bay, which they had somehow transformed into a mobile research station equipped with monitoring devices that I didn't recognize and definitely didn't understand. The quantum observation arrays will allow real-time analysis of tactical decision-making processes, they explained when I asked about the equipment. We can record and analyze your tactical innovations as they occur. You're going to be watching us think? I asked. We're going to be studying how you solve problems, Dr. Quell corrected. The goal is to identify the cognitive processes that enable human tactical creativity. Our new mission orders had come directly from Coalition Command, which meant Admiral Kresick had somehow convinced his superiors that collaborating with mysterious alien researchers was in the Coalition's best interests. Either that, or he'd decided not to mention the alien collaboration part, and was hoping we'd figure out how to make the arrangement work without getting anyone court-martialed. Mission briefing, Vex announced as we gathered on the bridge. Intelligence has identified unusual activity in the Rigel sector. Multiple shipping routes disrupted, communication arrays offline, and reports of unidentified vessels operating in violation of territorial agreements. Sounds like either pirates or someone trying to look like pirates, Hayes observed. Intelligence assessment suggests pirates, Vex continued. But the tactical patterns don't match known pirate organizations. The attacks are too coordinated and too technologically sophisticated. Synthesizers? I asked. Possible, Dr. Quell said from their monitoring station. The tactical approach described in these reports is consistent with human-style environmental manipulation, but implemented with technology that exceeds standard galactic norms. So we're going to investigate, Zorion said, and hopefully figure out whether we're dealing with unusually sophisticated pirates or aliens who learn to fight like humans. That's the general idea, I agreed. And if it turns out to be the synthesizers? Hayes asked. Then we improvise, I said, because that seemed to be the standard answer to most questions about how we were going to handle complicated situations. Excellent, Dr. Quell said with what appeared to be satisfaction. Real-time tactical improvisation against an opponent using corrupted human tactical methods. This should provide fascinating research data. I'm glad our potential deaths will be scientifically valuable, Hayes said dryly. All deaths are scientifically valuable if properly analyzed, Dr. Quell replied, apparently missing the sarcasm entirely. But we have no intention of allowing you to die. Your survival is essential to the continuation of our research. How reassuring, Vex muttered. The journey to the Rigel sector took 18 hours, during which Dr. Quell subjected us to what they described as baseline cognitive analysis. This involved a series of tactical scenarios designed to map our problem-solving approaches, psychological profiles, and what they called our creative response patterns. Fascinating, Dr. Quell announced after reviewing the analysis results. Each team member demonstrates distinct tactical preferences, but all 4 approaches are fundamentally based on the same underlying principles. What principles? I asked. Resource maximization, environmental integration, adaptive implementation, and what I'm classifying as constructive unpredictability, Dr. Quell explained. You consistently identify tactical opportunities that conventional analysis would overlook. Because conventional analysis assumes you're working with conventional resources, Zorion pointed out. We don't limit ourselves to military equipment. Exactly. Your tactical thinking operates outside the constraints that limit most species to predetermined strategic options. So what does that tell you about how to fight the synthesizers? Hayes asked. Dr. Quell manipulated their research displays, showing tactical projections based on their analysis. If the synthesizers are using human tactical approaches, they will be expecting opponents to respond according to established military doctrine. They will not be expecting opponents who can out-improvise their improvised tactics. You want us to out-human the aliens who learn to fight like humans, I said. I want you to demonstrate that human tactical creativity cannot be replicated without the underlying cognitive and cultural framework that makes it possible. Dr. Quell corrected. No pressure, Vex observed. Actually significant pressure, Dr. Quell agreed seriously. The tactical implications of this mission extend far beyond the immediate operational objectives. We may be determining whether human tactical approaches represent a sustainable military advantage or merely a temporary tactical novelty. Great. No pressure at all. Chapter 14. First contact, second time. We dropped out of Quantum Drive at the edge of the Rigel sector to find a situation that was definitely not standard piracy. 3 Coalition merchant vessels hung dead in space, their hulls intact but all power systems offline. No debris field, no signs of weapons fire, no indication of how they'd been disabled. That's not normal, Hayes observed, studying the tactical display. Pirates usually leave debris fields, Zorion agreed. Disabled ships with intact hulls suggest technology that can selectively shut down power systems without causing structural damage. Ion cannons? I suggested. Ion cannons leave distinctive energy signatures, Vex said, running sensor analysis. I'm not detecting any residual ionic discharge. Then how are they disabled? I asked. Dr. Quell consulted their research equipment. The ships appear to be in perfect condition except for complete power system failure. This suggests a technology that can selectively disrupt specific systems while leaving others intact. I tried to process the implications. That's incredibly sophisticated. That's synthesizer technology, Dr. Quell said grimly. They've developed selective system disruption capabilities that allow them to disable targets without destroying valuable cargo. So they're not pirates, Hayes said. There's something worse. They're researchers, Dr. Quell corrected. They disable ships to study their technology, crew, and cargo. Then they analyze the data to improve their own tactical capabilities. What happens to the crews? I asked. Unknown. The ships are always found empty. That was not reassuring. Movement on senses, Vex announced. 3 unidentified vessels approaching from the system's outer orbit. The tactical display updated to show ships unlike anything in Coalition databases. They were clearly designed for combat, but their configuration suggested technology that operated according to different principles than standard galactic norms. Synthesizer vessels, Dr. Quell confirmed. Design philosophy appears to incorporate tactical elements from multiple species, including human environmental manipulation approaches. They're hailing us, Vex reported. Put them through, I decided. The communications array activated, and a voice that sounded disturbingly similar to our own communication with the research station filled the bridge. Coalition vessel improvisation. Your tactical approaches have been studied with great interest. We would like to conduct direct analysis of your combat capabilities. They want to fight us, Hayes translated. They want to study us, Dr. Quell corrected. Combat analysis through direct engagement. They'll disable our ship and analyze our tactical responses. What if we decline their generous offer? Zorion asked. Decline is not an option, the voice replied, apparently having no trouble monitoring our internal communications. Your tactical innovations represent valuable research data. Cooperation will result in minimal damage to ship and crew. And if we don't cooperate? I asked. Non-cooperation will result in data acquisition through alternative methods. That sounds like a threat, Hayes observed. That is a threat, the voice confirmed. Please prepare for tactical analysis. The 3 synthesizer ships began moving toward us in a formation that suggested they'd studied Coalition tactical manuals very carefully. Too carefully, in fact. Their approach was textbook perfect, which meant it was predictable. They're following standard engagement protocols, Vex noted. Classic pincer movement with overlapping fire zones. Because they learned Coalition tactics from Coalition databases, I said, thinking out loud. They know what we're supposed to do. But we don't do what we're supposed to do, Hayes pointed out. Exactly, I said, feeling that familiar moment of tactical clarity that had saved my life at Kepler Station. They've studied human tactics, but they've studied the wrong humans. Explain, Dr. Quell requested, their research equipment already recording our decision-making process. They've studied established human tactics, I said, activating the ship's tactical systems. Military doctrine, standard procedures, established protocols. But that's not how humans actually fight. How do humans actually fight? Zorion asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. We cheat, I said, and began implementing a tactical approach that definitely wasn't in any manual. Chapter 15, Cheating Systematically. Define cheating in a tactical context, Dr. Batsya. Quell requested as I began plotting a course that would take us directly toward the synthesizer ships instead of away from them, using the opponent's expectations against them, I explained, activating systems that weren't technically weapons, but could be repurposed as weapons with a little creativity. They expect us to fight like coalition forces, so we fight like humans. I thought humans were coalition forces, Vex said, but he was already running tactical analysis on my unconventional approach. Coalition forces follow doctrine, Hayes said, catching on to the plan. Humans ignore doctrine when it's inconvenient. The synthesizers have studied coalition tactical responses, I continued, bringing us to what appeared to be a suicidal intercept course with 3 ships that significantly outgunned us. They know exactly how coalition ships respond to superior numbers. How do coalition ships respond to superior numbers? Dr. Quell asked. Evasive maneuvers, defensive formations, strategic withdrawal, Zorion recited. Standard doctrine for engaging superior forces. Which is exactly what they're expecting, I said. So we do the opposite. Instead of evading, we accelerated directly toward the lead synthesizer ship. Instead of defensive formations, we configured for maximum forward firepower. Instead of strategic withdrawal, we committed to a head-on engagement that any rational tactical analysis would classify as suicide. This is insane, Vex observed, but he was already adjusting our sensor arrays to provide maximum target acquisition data. This is human, Hayes corrected, bringing our weapons online. The synthesizer ships reacted exactly as I'd hoped, with confusion. Their perfect tactical formation was designed to counter evasive maneuvers and defensive tactics. They weren't prepared for a direct assault from a smaller, lighter-armed ship. They're breaking formation, Zorion announced with obvious satisfaction, attempting to adjust for unexpected tactical approach. Too late, I said, implementing the second phase of the plan. As we closed to what appeared to be optimal weapons range, I activated the improvisation's quantum drive engines, not for travel, but as an improvised weapon system. The quantum field generators, when overloaded and focused through the ship's sensor arrays, created what amounted to a localized space-time distortion directly in front of the lead synthesizer ship. You're weaponizing our propulsion system? Dr. Quell asked with what sounded like academic fascination. I'm repurposing our propulsion system for tactical applications, I corrected, watching as the lead synthesizer ship flew directly into a quantum distortion that played hell with their navigation systems. The result was spectacular. The synthesizer ship found itself suddenly traveling in 3 different directions simultaneously, while their tactical computers tried to figure out how their target had just violated several fundamental principles of physics. 1 down, Hayes announced as the confused alien ship spun out of control. 2 to go, Zorion added, targeting the remaining synthesizers with weapons that had been modified according to principles that definitely weren't in the manual. The second phase of our unconventional assault involved using the ship's communication arrays as directed energy weapons. By overloading the quantum entanglement transmitters and focusing the resulting energy discharge through the sensor arrays, we created what amounted to an improvised particle beam cannon. That's not possible, Dr. Quell observed as we fired our improvised weapon at the second synthesizer ship. Neither was turning a mining station into a battlefield, I replied, watching our jury-rigged particle beam punch through the enemy ship's shields. But it worked anyway. You're using equipment failure as a tactical weapon, Dr. Quell said with obvious amazement. The communication array overload creates an energy discharge that functions as an improvised beam weapon. We're using everything as a tactical weapon, Hayes corrected, firing conventional weapons at the third synthesizer ship, while they were still trying to figure out how we'd just shot them with a communication system. The battle was over in less than 10 minutes. 3 synthesizer ships, disabled or destroyed through tactics that violated everything they'd learned about human military doctrine. Tactical analysis complete, Dr. Quell announced. Human combat effectiveness confirmed. Synthesizer countermeasures insufficient. Were they studying us the whole time? I asked. Undoubtedly, Dr. Quell replied. But they were studying the wrong data. They expected human tactical doctrine. You provided human tactical creativity. What's the difference? Vex asked. Doctrine can be countered, Dr. Quell explained. Creativity cannot be predicted. The disabled synthesizer ships were broadcasting what appeared to be distress signals, but in languages that our translation systems couldn't process. Should we attempt to render assistance? Zorion asked. Should we attempt to gather intelligence? Hayes countered. We should attempt to understand what just happened, I decided. Dr. Quell, what did your analysis show? Dr. Quell manipulated their research displays, showing the recorded data from our engagement. The synthesizers approached this battle using human tactical principles integrated with superior technology. They expected you to respond according to established patterns. But we didn't, I said. You exceeded established patterns, Dr. Quell corrected. Your tactical approach demonstrated capabilities that cannot be replicated through technology alone. Such as? Creative problem-solving under pressure, adaptive resource utilization, and what I'm classifying as tactical intuition, the ability to identify optimal solutions to complex problems without conscious analysis. So we won because we're better at being human than aliens who studied how to be human? Hayes asked. You won because being human isn't something that can be learned, Dr. Quell replied. It's something that has to be experienced. Epilogue. The report. 3 weeks later, I found myself back in Admiral Kresick's office, delivering what was probably the strangest mission report in Coalition military history. Dr. Quell sat beside me, their shifting features somehow managing to convey the kind of academic satisfaction that comes from having one's theoretical hypotheses confirmed through practical experimentation. So, Admiral Kresick said, reviewing the preliminary reports from our collaboration with the Tau Epsilon research station. Let me understand this correctly. You've established a research partnership with an advanced alien species who study warfare for academic purposes. Yes, sir, I replied. You've gained access to the most comprehensive tactical database in galactic history. Yes, sir. You've identified and neutralized a potential threat from hostile aliens who had been studying human military techniques. Yes, sir. And you've proven that human tactical approaches represent a fundamental military advantage that cannot be replicated through technology or training alone. That's the general summary, sir. Admiral Kresick leaned back in his chair and fixed me with the kind of stare that suggested he was trying to decide whether to recommend me for promotion or psychiatric evaluation. Lieutenant Ellis, he said finally, when I assigned you to the Rapid Response Team, I expected you to get involved in unusual situations. I did not expect you to revolutionize galactic military theory. I'm not sure I revolutionized anything, sir, I said. I just did what came naturally. That, Dr. Quell interjected, is precisely the point. Human tactical innovation operates at an instinctive level that other species require centuries of military development to achieve. And this gives the Coalition significant strategic advantages? Admiral Kresick asked. Potentially enormous advantages, Dr. Quell confirmed, provided that human tactical approaches are properly understood and systematically applied. Which is why we're recommending the establishment of a formal tactical innovation program, I added. Training other Coalition species in human-style creative problem-solving. You want to teach aliens how to think like humans? Admiral Kresick said. We want to teach Coalition forces how to approach tactical problems the way humans approach tactical problems, I corrected. Not following predetermined doctrine, but analyzing available resources and developing creative solutions in real time. Admiral Kresick considered this for a long moment, his forearms performing what I'd learned to recognize as deep contemplation. The political implications would be significant, he finally said. Other species might resist the suggestion that human tactical approaches are superior to their own military traditions. Which is why we're framing it as tactical diversity enhancement rather than human tactical superiority, I said. We're not suggesting that human approaches are better. We're suggesting that they're different, and that difference provides tactical advantages in specific situations. Diplomatic phrasing, Admiral Kresick observed with what might have been approval. Very well. I'll forward your recommendations to Coalition Command. In the meantime, the Rapid Response Team will continue conducting missions with Dr. Quell as embedded researcher. More impossible situations? I asked. Undoubtedly, Admiral Kresick replied. The galaxy seems to have an unlimited supply of impossible situations that require unconventional solutions. Excellent, Dr. Quell said with obvious satisfaction. Continued field research opportunities will provide valuable data for our tactical innovation studies. As we left Admiral Kresick's office, I found myself thinking about how much had changed since that morning in the Academy Rec Hall, when I'd watched myself on combat footage without anyone knowing it was me. 3 weeks later, I was a lieutenant on an elite rapid response team, working with alien researchers to study human tactical innovation, and somehow responsible for developments that might change galactic military doctrine. Regrets? Hayes asked as we walked back toward the hangar bay where the improvisation was waiting for our next mission. I thought about it. The safe, boring routine of standard patrol duty versus dangerous, unpredictable adventures with a team of highly skilled misfits and an alien researcher who found our tactical creativity fascinating. None, I said. Good, Zorion said cheerfully. Because according to our new mission orders, we're being deployed to investigate reports of impossible gravitational anomalies in the Vega system. Impossible gravitational anomalies? I repeated. The kind that suggests someone is experimenting with weaponized space-time manipulation, Vex explained. Intelligence classifies it as another developing situation of undefined scope and potentially significant consequences. So, Dr. Quell observed with the kind of academic enthusiasm that suggested they were looking forward to more field research opportunities. Another impossible situation that will require creative tactical solutions. I looked at my teammates, the demolitions expert who considered explosions to be educational opportunities, the tactical analyst who had turned paranoia into a science, the weapons specialist who viewed furniture as viable combat equipment, and the alien researcher who studied warfare for the advancement of galactic peace. Yeah, I said, feeling that familiar moment of anticipation that came with facing impossible odds with insufficient resources and way too much improvisation. It sounds like fun. And despite everything, despite the fact that a month ago I'd been a cadet whose biggest concern was passing theoretical tactics, despite the fact that I'd somehow become the poster child for human tactical innovation, despite the fact that our next mission involved investigating what sounded like another textbook setup for getting killed in creative ways, I realized that I meant it. It really did sound like fun. After all, we were humans. Making the impossible possible was what we did, even when we had to make it up as we went along. Especially when we had to make it up as we went along. The end.